call the meeting to order. Welcome to the meeting number 60 of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. The committee is meeting today to continue its study of the Quebec Electoral Boundary Commission report. For our first panel, we have with us Mr. Stéphane Bergeron, MP, Montarville, Ms. Claude de Bellefeuille, MP, Salaberry-Sirois, and Mr. Jean-Denis Garon, MP, Mirabel. You will each have 4 minutes for an opening statement, after which we will proceed to questions from the committee members. Mr. Bergeron, we'll begin with you. Welcome. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, colleagues. During the previous reform, I was a member of the National Assembly, and aside from the fact that I wasn't concerned by the writing, but I thought we have nothing to do with the name of Montarville. My request is not, therefore, really an objection to the report by the Electoral Boundary Commission for Quebec, but I'm suggesting that we change the name of the Montarville electoral designation so that it's more representative of the communities and people that live there. Indeed, the name Montarville refers primarily to an old seigneury which pertains to the city of Saint-Bruno de Montarville and does not have an impact on this part of the electoral district. While the name Montarville is quite appropriate provincially because of the fact that the two municipalities in it, that is Boucherville, which is not part of the federal riding, and Saint-Bruno de Montarville, are crossed and connected by the Montarville Boulevard. But it is less appropriate at the federal level. It would therefore be possible, in my opinion, that we change the electoral riding name so that's more inclusive for the communities and populations in it. So, particularly since we are now talking about adding in part of the city of Cagnon, which was not in favor of adding it being added to the federal riding of Montarville. Although there is a geographic element that is common to all three municipalities, namely Saint-Basile-le-Grand, Saint-Bruno de Montarville, and Saint-Julie, it is in fact Mount Saint-Bruno, which is found there, that all the citizens are able to feel linked to this riding. It's easily recognizable. And this mountain is located on the Montérégie plain and is a very distinctive part of the riding. It has a park there as well as a very popular ski center. In order to create a feeling of belonging that can be shared by all of the citizens in this electoral district, I believe that a change in name would be indispensable, particularly with the amendments that have been proposed by the Commission, and to take into account the sensitivities of the people who live in Cagnon, who will now be included in the federal riding called Montarville. I think it would be appropriate to add the word Mont Saint-Bruno and l'Acadie. The Acadie River crosses through the city of Cagnon and is part of Saint-Basile-le-Grand. More importantly, the name l'Acadie refers to an historic region in Canada that pertain to the deportation. It's for these reasons that I'm suggesting that the federal riding of Montarville, as modified in the Commission's proposal, be now called the electoral district of Mont Saint-Bruno l'Acadie, or l'Acadie Mont Saint-Bruno. This new name would enable us to distinguish this district, the federal district, from the provincial one. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And now we will continue with Ms. de Bellefeuille. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank you for hearing the various notices of objections to the changes proposed by the Federal Electoral Boundaries Commission for Quebec. I myself took part in the public consultation when the Commission visited Salaberry de Valleyfield on October 3rd. The commissioners were able to hear the opinions of 9 participants to understand the context, the initial proposal published this summer called for two significant changes to Salaberry-sur-Roi. Firstly, the boundaries of the riding would be substantially changed. On the eastern boundary of my electoral district, 7 municipalities would be transferred to the future electoral district of Châteauguay, Les Jardins, and Lapierre, and on the western boundary, 2 municipalities would be added. Secondly, it was proposed that the name of the electoral division be changed from Salaberry-sur-Roi to Salaberry-sur-Roi-Soulanges. Following discussions I had with the mayors, RCMs, and CDCs affected by the boundary changes, I would say that the proposal was not agreed to unanimously. But I would say that a certain consensus did emerge. Some opposition was expressed by the community of Pointe-des-Cascades. I note that their current member of parliament, while sympathetic to the argument and unhappy with the Commission's choice, did not file an objection today. In short, the riding distribution proposal is acceptable in my view. My objection stems from the choice of the district name. As I was saying, the initial proposal suggested the name of Salaberry-sur-Roi-Soulanges, the addition of Soulanges to the name of the riding that I represent, and especially the removal of the word Soulanges from the future riding of Vaudreuil, was welcomed by everyone. We have just corrected an error made by the Commission back in 2012, since the sector of Soulanges is mostly in Salaberry-sur-Roi. It just goes to show that the electoral commissions, Madam Chair, can sometimes make mistakes. However, in the recent Commission report, the name is changed once again. The new name proposed is Beauharnois-Soulanges. In other words, we would go from Salaberry-sur-Roi to Beauharnois-Soulanges. This is therefore a major change which has not been subject to public consultation. In concrete terms, the name Salaberry-sur-Roi is being removed completely, replaced with Beauharnois-Soulanges. I respectfully submit that the Commission did not fully consider the comments made by citizens during the public consultation. I'm of the opinion that there is consensus for retaining the following name: Beauharnois-Soulanges Huntington, as Beauharnois, Soulanges, and Huntington are the names of the ridings of my colleagues at the National Assembly. This will be less confusing to citizens. The word Salaberry is also important since it refers to Salaberry de Valleyfield, the largest town in the riding, which is included in the proposed riding. I have, moreover, submitted to the clerk letters of support from the Rive of the Haut-Saint-Laurent RCM and the Mayor of Salaberry de Valleyfield, who are also requesting such a name change for the future federal riding. And finally, I'd like to point out that I approached the Grand Chief of the Mohawk community of Akwesasne, whose area I proudly represent on the Quebec side, and he did not wish to submit an Aboriginal name for a riding. I'd like to conclude by giving my full support to the members from Eastern Quebec who came to testify last week, since the Commission is still proposing the abolition of Avignon, La Métis, Matane, Matapedia. The findings of the Eastern Quebec MPs speak for themselves, and their opposition is entirely justified. You know, Madam Chair, I represent one of the most populated ridings in Quebec. Nevertheless, I support the demands made by the municipalities in this region, the local, regional, county municipalities, the elected officials of the National Assembly, and, of course, the 4 federal members from Eastern Quebec. Thank you, Ms. de Bellefeuille. Mr. Garon. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for hearing me today. In the first version of the electoral map that was proposed by the Commission, the city of Saint-Anne-des-Plaines remained in the Mirabel riding. Then, after various consultations, we got the second version of this map, and to our great surprise, the municipality of Saint-Anne-des-Plaines was taken completely out of Mirabel. I must say that this consultation and this new version of the map was not viewed favorably, because no consultation was offered, no opportunity was given to the people in Saint-Anne-des-Plaines to intervene, and the mayor of Saint-Anne-des-Plaines and the and the provincial MP is not in agree with us. And so that being said, we're breaking up a community of interest that's very significant. You understand that we're taking Saint-Anne-des-Plaines and we're attaching it to Rivière-du-Nord. First of all, Mirabel, this is a community of interest. It's in the Bas-Saint-Laurent economic region. Mirabel has neighboring municipalities have a great deal of projects that they do together. When we accepted immigrants and refugees and we integrated them into the society, we had organizations there in Saint-Anne-des-Plaines and in Mirabel that worked together. And we did not cover Rivière-du-Nord. So the local newspapers that cover all of the community activities in Mirabel and other regions share the same pool of journalists that cover Saint-Anne-des-Plaines and none in Rivière-du-Nord. The school boards that provide primary, secondary, and professional education to our citizens don't have any students from Rivière-du-Nord. The Mirabel Training School, which is located in this district, trains the farmers in Saint-Anne-des-Plaines. You know, in Mirabel, there was a lot of expropriation that was done back in the 70s, expropriations that are still causing problems today and cause concerns with respect to this territory. And this expropriation in Mirabel and in Saint-Anne-des-Plaines did take place, so we have to have an integrated region, and that is what I am pleading for. There is also the whole feeling of apartness, of belonging between Mirabel and Saint-Anne-des-Plaines. I must tell you that keeping Saint-Anne-des-Plaines, keeping it in Mirabel would not change the electoral quotient. We're talking about 2%, and you have to take into account the demographic growth. We do have limitations on a demographic increase because we want some of these towns to remain agricultural in nature. It's obvious that we're breaking up a community of interest. It is, and the communities have not reacted to this new map very positively at all. In Terrebonne, so people have been jostled around from various regions, but when you look at the demographic population, we think that the map should be divided in a different way. We need better stability, and we have to make sure that we don't break up these communities. I'm always like this. Are we ready? Because we don't have much time. But we'll continue our meeting. So we'll begin 6 minutes. Mr. Gord, followed by Mr. Fergus, Mr. Terrien, and then Ms. Blaney. I'd like to remind you that you should speak a little bit more slowly so that the interpreters can do their job. If there's a problem, please raise your hand. And we'll ask people to speak at a slower pace. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Guéron. You said that it would not change a great deal when it comes to the electoral quotient. You talked about 2%, so we're talking about 2,000 people. And you talked about the domino effect. Will one community be put at a disadvantage? In the documents I provided to you, you can see that I have the support of the member for Rivière-du-Nord. We're talking about 2%. So it will have, it will not entail any domino results. It won't have an impact on the other regions. We are talking about a riding that is quite populated. We've removed a little part of the writing, which makes sense, but there will be no domino effect if the Commission does go ahead and grant my request. And your writing, who is responsible for this part that's going to be carved out for your writing? Well, is that going to change? Is it this will deal with this be within the 2% as well? No, the writings are quite well balanced. It's the case for Mirabel and for Rivière du Nord, which leads me to say that by reintegrating this, it will have a negligible effect on the quotient. And if the Commission agrees to my objection, I would say that over the past few years, there has been a great deal of growth in Saint-Julie and Saint-Jérôme, which are in the Rivière du Nord riding, and that would be advantageous for them, and it would make more sense to keep Saint-Anne-des-Plaines in Mirabel, where the urban development has been capped. Saint-Anne-des-Plaines has reached its threshold, and even in terms of time, it makes absolute sense to return Saint-Anne-des-Plaines to keep this balance. Mr. Bergeron, Ms. de Bellefeuille, I think you've made some very good presentations that make sense. In addition to changing the name, Madame de Bellefeuille, is there anything that you wish to add? Or Mr. Bergeron? I would simply like to say that, like my colleague, I didn't appear before the Commission initially. I was waiting to see what the new configuration of the map would be for the riding. And when I saw that a good part of Carignan was going to be added to Montarville, and when I saw the negative reaction of the city of Carignan with respect to this change, I said to myself that I needed to do something. I had to be welcoming, but I also had to ensure that the people in Carignan, like the people in Saint-Julie, Saint-Basile-le-Grand, that they would feel a sense of a belonging. And that's why I've moved forward with this proposal to ensure that Mont Saint-Bruno be included in the name, and it will, and in the name of l'Acadie, this river which goes through Saint-Basile-le-Grand, be also included in the new riding name. In the time that I have left, Madam Chair, can I respond to Mr. Gord? Yes. I'd just like to say that the idea is that, well, we know that a name is important for the people we represent. And right now, my colleagues and the member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges and myself, well, I have the whole municipality in Soulanges in my territory, and people are confused. The communities are all confused because they thought Soulanges was covered by Peter, by my colleague, and he is a member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. And now we can see here the importance of the name of a riding so that people have to feel connected to it and understand it. And the last time that this review was conducted, there was a mistake made in the name. And this time we're hoping that we'll have a name where most of the citizens and the organizations and business people will know where this boundary is. Thank you, Mr. Gord. Mr. Fergus. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to thank my Quebec colleagues for coming here today. I have a question for you, Mr. Bergeron. According to the Commission's report for redistribution, we can see the changes that have been made. If things were to stay the same, why do you think that Mont Saint-Bruno et l'Acadie would be feel more represented? As I had an opportunity to say, Madam Chair, the name Montarville only pertains to the Saint-Bruno Montarville. Saint-Julie doesn't feel connected to this, nor does Saint-Basile-le-Grand. They don't feel part of Montarville. Same for the people in Saint-Hubert. And Carignan which would now be added to the Monteval riding, are getting dragged, feel like they're being dragged into this. So there's this whole idea of belonging. But there's no real community of interest other than the word Saint-Bruno. The only community of interest, it's the three communities have Mont Saint-Bruno in common.
What could create that sense of belonging? Well, everybody can see Mont Saint-Bruno regardless of where you are. And the Acadie River crosses not only the city of Carignan, but also Saint-Basile-le-Grand. And so people from Carignan would say, okay, well, we're split in two, but we have some belonging to the riding Mont Saint-Bruno-L'Acadie or L'Acadie-Mont Saint-Bruno, because at that point there would be a geographic element that would reach them. So to have an electoral district that is a bit of a patchwork in Montarville, we need to find something beyond the community of interest that would be able to bring together the people of that electoral district. And I think that how it's named is very important so that people can really find themselves and feel included in an electoral district, specifically at the federal level. Speaking to Ms. Bellefeuille, during your opening remarks, you stated that the new boundaries were not received unanimously, but there was consensus. What did you mean by that? When I prepared my brief for the Commission, Madam Chair, I consulted the three reeves of my riding, and none of them, and none of the CDCs wanted to be opposed to the new boundary. There's a small municipality, Pointe des Cascades, that was opposed. It has a population of about 2,800 people, and it's a part of the Vaudreuil-Soulanges district. But it's not something that was very polarizing, and there wasn't a strong position by Reeves. The RCM of the Haut-Saint-Laurent is cut in two, and there are municipalities that would be in the new riding of Châteauguay, and they're not necessarily disappointed. The only opposition was an Anglophone citizen who was dissatisfied with the boundaries being made because they felt that the Anglophone community was now divided in two. But that's the only objection right now, and it really didn't reach many people. Thank you, Madam Chair. Do I have time for another quick question? Mr. Garon, briefly. Wanting to keep Sainte-Anne-des-Plaines in the riding of Mirabel, does that give you a political advantage? Mr. Fergus, I always tell the truth. We did the math. It makes an enormous difference of 0%. The only thing it does is give me more work, but I will still ask for it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Mr. Thérien. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the three members who came to share their opinions with us. My first question is for Mr. Bergeron. I know Carignan well. You talked about Mont Saint-Bruno. I think that it's a good idea. And when you look at Carignan and the importance of the Acadie River, I imagine you received positive comments from people living in Carignan who thought that they saw themselves more in that new district. I have to say that the comments with this addition have been mostly negative, so we need to find some positive elements so that the people of Carignan can feel included. They're concerned that they're being split into two separate districts. I think that changing the name of the riding would allow the wound to heal because they don't see the addition to Monterville as being a good thing. So we need to find something other than the great member that represents them to help them with the change. I also think it's important to note that there's a lot of confusion between the electoral district at the federal and the provincial levels because they're quite different. It makes sense on the provincial level that it's called Monterville. And at the federal level, they copied the provincial level, but it doesn't make any sense federally because it only touches the city of Saint-Bruno-Montarville. Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Ms. Bellefeuille, you talked about the boundaries that were not unanimously accepted. But what about the name? During the meeting of October 3rd, did anyone say that the new name was interesting, or were they not in approval of the new name? As you mentioned, I was there, and during the discussions, it was quite clear for everyone that Soulanges needed to be there because the Soulanges Canal was important in that district. So nobody was against that. And then we asked questions on Surroi, and there was an issue there because they heard in a past life that Surroi was important for the territory. It was the case, but it didn't mean anything for anyone anymore. So we did share that with the commissioners, who were surprised, but they understood. Beauharnois is also a word that was talked about. It's an important city. It's a provincial electoral district. And so there was consensus for Soulanges and Beauharnois, and the riding was already Salaberry, so Salaberry of Valleyfield is a big city in my riding, and you know it. And so I was quite surprised to see in the final proposal a new name that was completely different and not even proposed by the people who were at the consultation. And yet there was unanimity for Beauharnois, Salaberry. Mr. Garon, I think you talked about communities of interest, and I was convinced by what you said. You also talked about Saint-Anne-des-Plaines and how they were not consulted. You're very close to your constituents, so what have they said? I'm a spokesperson for the community. Before coming here today, I listened to my community. The mayor of Saint-Anne-des-Plaines, you received the letter that she sent. She was shocked to see that Saint-Anne-des-Plaines was being removed from Mirabel without any consultations or any notice. Same thing for the provincial member. There's Saint-Janvier, that's a big part of Mirabel. It's like Rouen and Noranda. They're two cities where people travel back and forth every day for work, for school, for leisure. And so I am the spokesperson for their grievances. And in Saint-Anne-des-Plaines, they're all in agreement that this was a bad decision made by the Commission. What does this mean for you as an MP? Well, there are a lot of our tasks that involve communicating with constituents. Look at the Marie-Ève Center, for example, that offers psychological support. This is a strong organization. They work in Mirabel and Saint-Anne-des-Plaines, not Rivière-du-Nord. Same for the Lower Laurentians, where there's an organization that works in Saint-Anne-des-Plaines and in Mirabel. I talked about ABL Immigration. and even the healthcare system impacts Sainte-Anne-des-Plaines. And agriculture. Sainte-Anne-des-Plaines, 87% agriculture. That's not the case throughout the Laurentians. Thank you. Ms. Blaney.
For being here. All of my questions have already been answered. Thank you everyone for asking them for me, so you have all my time.
Mrs. Blaney, you know what I was going to say? Amazing, because Laurence and Andre just said to me, because committee members chose 6 questions. And before we got to the end of the first round, they had just said that our witnesses have provided answers to all 6 of them. So thank you, and I appreciate your due diligence. So we will continue with Monsieur Gourde ou Monsieur Berthold.
Madame la Présidente, comme
Madam Chair, as my colleague of the NDP stated, all of our questions have been answered, and we don't have any objections to what our colleagues have asked for today. Everything has been said. Ms. Romanado? I just wanted to thank my colleagues, and we also don't have any questions. Mr. Terrien? I would have a question for all 3 of my colleagues. Maybe in 1 minute each. You have a very clear position, in my view. How do you interpret the fact that the commissioners have not understood what you shared? I find it very interesting. So perhaps 1 minute each, if you could explain the apprehension. I'll start by saying that I have nothing against the commissioners. There was a previous activity for separating ridings where there were no communities of interest beyond Saint-Bruno, but they should examine what can be done in order to create a sense of belonging in that district where there's no community of interest beyond the Mont Saint-Bruno. There's nothing to create that sense of belonging beyond the name. So I was waiting to see the results of the final proposal to see whether or not I'd go forward with the name. And because Carignan was still a part of the name, I figured it was a time to proceed. Madam Chair, just to say that commissioners did hear us, and it was difficult to talk about the boundaries. The RCMs are split in 2, but I know that the fact that Vaudreuil-Soulanges has had a significant population increase, so the choice of the commissioners was very difficult. So even though there was a brief saying that RCMs shouldn't be split, the commissioners didn't really have a choice. So that's why I said that there was consensus. But the issue for us is the name. We don't understand why we were consulted for a name, and after hearing from us, they proposed a name that had nothing to do with what was said and what was heard. That's why we were surprised. And that's why we are encouraging members of the committee to make a good report and recommend that if the commission won't change, well then the government can table a motion to make all the changes that we've proposed today. Very good, thank you. Ms. Blaney, do you want Mr. Garon to respond?
Yes, of course. Oui.
Merci, c'est...
Thank you, that's greatly appreciated. So in the Laurentians, it was very complex for the commission because they added a new riding. The way that was done is that it happened during the hearings. There were a lot of criticisms, and so they had to re-examine the boundaries of this new riding completely. And in the first map, where they were examining the boundaries, they were careful to not break apart the different communities of interest, but then they had to start at 0, and there was a game of dominoes here. And because there was no consultations for the second part, well, even though they acted in goodwill, accidentally, they thought that Saint-Anne-des-Plaines would have a community of interest with the other northern communities, whereas that's not the case. That's why there are hearings with the Commission in order to reiterate that a community of interest is being broken, that it can be reintegrated to Mirabel without any electoral impact or demographic impact and no domino effect. That's why it was so complex for the Commission, and I'd like to thank them for their work, but I think that there is more to be done. Thank you. Ms. Blaney, do you have any other questions?
Questions,
C'est
thank you.
très bien apprécié.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Bergeron, Madame de Bellefeuille, and Mr. Garon, thank you for being with us. If you have anything else to add, please send it to the clerk, and it will be shared with everyone else. That said, have a good day.
As the next panel commences, and I know most of it is here, they will get set up, but I understand we just want to have a quick question and a conversation in regards to the other study that we're doing, and I'll pass the floor over to Mrs. Blaney.
Well, thank you so much, Chair. I guess for me, I just want to clarify, I did do a notice to motion about having the special rapporteur come in and talk to us about the study or the work that he is doing. It sounds like from the last conversation in committee that people are open to that. So I just was going to check if we could just move forward, add him to the list and move on.
Mr. Berthold?
Oui.
Donc, il n'y a pas un problème.
There's no issue.
I feel that we have everybody's agreement, and I'll confirm with our one member from the bloc, but I do believe that that's fine. So as we are proceeding to look at inviting witnesses, the letter that was sent to PROC committee members through myself was about people who should come on their own, and we will add the Right Honourable David Johnson to the list of people who come on their own. Excellent. So that will be added and noted for the record. Avec ça, on va commencer notre deuxième panel
We'll start our second panel.
for about 30 seconds while they set up.
Everyone, we are resuming our meeting number 60. And we are continuing our study on the Quebec Electoral Boundary Commission report. For our second panel, we have with us today Luc Beltord, MP Mégantic-L'Érable, the Honourable Marie-Claude Bibeau, Compton Stansted, and Louis Plamondon, MP Bécancour Nicolet Sorel. You'll have 4 minutes each for your opening remarks, following which we will move on to questions from the members of the committee. We'll start with Mr. Beltol. You'll have up to 4 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues, for allowing me to sit in the witness seat today. After hearing from other colleagues, it is now my turn, and thank you to my colleagues for being here. You'll see that what I have to say is not very complicated. We looked at our ridings, and we have agreements with our neighboring ridings, and our proposal is unanimous, specifically from the 3 MPs that are impacted by the changes in Mégantic-L'Érable, because It is a big riding. I had to communicate with 2 colleagues, and we ensured that we would consult each other and consult our constituents. I'm not going to remake my presentation. I sent a letter that you've all read. I think that's what was important, and I just want to highlight that Mégantic-l'Érable currently represents 50 municipalities. The center city is Thetford Mines. I represent 3 RCMs, and Mégantic-l'Érable is in 3 different administrative regions. For those who know what it means to be an MP, I meet 3 times the agricultural groups, and it makes for a lot of meetings. The proposal, as shocking as it might be, would add an RCM to the riding of Mégantic-l'Érable. I would have then 61 municipalities instead of 50, but I'm completely in agreement with the proposal. That's my role. But when the commissioners came, they had to work with the legislation that they had in front of them at the time. And indeed, there wasn't enough voters in Mégantic-l'Érable, so they had to do some work. The first proposal included different communities in Lotbinière, and after discussions with the member for that region, we had a discussion in order to better respect communities of interest. What we're asking to the Commission to review has to do with municipalities that are a part of Mégantic-l'Érable that come from Stansted. There are not a lot of ties between Mégantic-l'Érable, and that would add a 5th RCM to Mégantic-l'Érable. I think that for the good of everyone and voters in that community, they should stay in Compton-Stansted, especially because we weren't able to discuss all of this because it wasn't in the first proposal that the municipality be moved to Mégantic-l'Érable. I would also like to maintain 2 municipalities that are already in Mégantic-l'Érable and one in Lotbinière. I don't want Lotbinière to be split into 3 districts because Mégantic-l'Érable, if you look at the map, it's like a big banana. We're between everyone. And we feel like we could move municipalities, but it's not that simple. All the mayors that we consulted and RCMs, they agree with the proposal that we're making. So we have the support of people, and I'll answer your questions if you have any specific questions, but the proposal that we have is reasonable. It respects communities of interest, and there is an agreement between the MPs, not for partisan reasons, but for communities, and we understand the details and how these communities work and who they interact with, and that's why we've shared this proposal with you today. Thank you. Ms. Bibeau? Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the reasons with you that I believe that the municipalities of Wheaton and Scottstown should stay within Compton-Stansted. We're talking about 3,700 inhabitants. As you know, I am supported by resolutions from the RCM and the 3 municipalities that are impacted, and the MP for Mégantic-l'Érable that would be welcoming these communities, Mr. Berthold. It is important to align the boundaries with other administrations in Quebec. I will focus on the RCMs, the regional county municipalities, but it could also be applied to municipalities and administrative regions. We need to examine the personalities of these municipalities, and we shouldn't move the boundaries without good reason, and respect the feeling of belonging and the community of interests of an RCM or a region, and understand their different roles. Lingswick, Scottstown do feel like they are a part of the Haut-Saint-François. RCMs are at the heart of vitality of regions, economically, geographically. The RCM assures coherence and cohesion of elected officials, especially for government programs. For efficiency and cohesion, we need to not have efforts being done twice. One aspect focuses on historic evolution. The people of Scottstown use health services and other services in places like Sherbrooke. Events are organized around the RCM. For example, the Center of Commerce, the Youth Center of Haut-Saint-François. The residents often do not go to Tedford for services. Same for jobs. Scottstown, Lingsworth, and Wheaton have a collective identity with the Haut-Saint-François, but also with l'Estrie. Currently, as the legislation stands, they should factor in that sense of belonging in Estrie. There are good examples of this, and for all these reasons, I recommend avoiding splitting these RCMs and administrative regions during the new boundary creation. I believe that things should stay in Compton-Stanstead. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci, Madame Bibeau.
Thank you, Madame Bibeau. Mr. Plamondon, welcome. Thank you for welcoming me here at this committee as a witness. I come from the second prettiest electoral district of Canada, including the one that you are from. So the growth of my electoral riding is one thing. I think the Honourable Minister said so well. There are 3 municipalities that have a lot of affinity with this region. And if I were given these 3 municipalities, it was said because I had a deficit in the population. So the 3 municipalities, we're talking about 2,000 people here. So we've put our heads together and realized that we haven't taken into consideration the latest data from my writing. Over the past 6 months, there have been 6 major construction projects open to build electric batteries. General Motors it was involved. There are 6 projects that are underway right now, and so we're building. We're building large plants that will bring in a lot of people in the region of Bécancour. And so we've decided to dezone over 5,000 lots in order to be able to proceed quickly with the construction of these plants so that we can house workers as well. So the region of Nicolet had its largest building boom in ever, and the region of Sorel right now has over 604 construction sites underway, and some are waiting authorization still. And within 6 months, there will be at least 2,000 people who will be living in these housings, 2 people per housing unit. So the deficit that I was told that we had, well, I have it in Sorel, I have it in Nicolet, and I can see a boost in the other regions as well. There will be a huge population growth. So these 3 municipalities that want to remain in Mr. Berthaud's electoral district is something that we need to consider. The big problem in my riding is the name change. For years now, my name, the name of my riding has been known as Bécancour, Nicolet, and Sorel. And now, without any consultation, without any And even when the final version of the report was published, it was still called Bekankan Nicolet Sorel. And it was decided to add the Abenaki community in my writing. We all agree with that, of course. But then there's the Wolinak and the Abenaki groups. And Nicolet as a region that has been in existence for over 350 years. It's the oldest in Canada. And Odanak is an agreement because they're wondering about Wabanaki as well. So we're adding the Wabanaki groups are included in this region that I sent you a letter on this. We don't want to remove them, but every time that the commissioner has written me, he says always, we are adding Odanak. There was never any question of doing otherwise, but I can show you these letters that I have here. People have written me saying they want to keep Nicolet in the name. Now, Abenaki, it's the name of our nation, and they want it to be that this name to be added, and it would be called Alnobak. So, Alnobak, Nicolet Sorel. That's what we'd like. Thank you, Mr. Plamondon. And I hope that the members are sitting on the committee. They're wondering why they heard a beeping sound. But, Mr. Plamondon, you're the member with the most experience. So it was difficult for me today to stop you. But the next time you hear the beep, 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 you have to stop. I promise you I'll do that. So with that, we will continue with our questions. And the first round will begin with Mr. Gord. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's for Mr. Berthold. You talked about 3 municipalities, Val-Alain, Lecovid, and another. Val-Alain are in the RCM of Lothian-Binière. And in the second proposal, this would be sent over to Mr. Plamondon's writing. So, Leroy was in your writing before, and it would be moving to Mr. Plamondon's electoral writing. The people in Val-Alain and in the other region, which I represent, would be to remain within the RCM of Lothian to the measure possible, and they accepted, with some regrets, obviously, Mr. Berthold. They represent the equivalent of provincially. Mr. Berthold, the Committee of Interest in Lothian, to what extent do you feel it's important that it remain in Lothian? And what about the close ties between Val-Alain, Villeroy, and economically and in terms of communities of interest? As you said, we're trying to break this into 3 parts here. When the first proposal arrived, the people in Lothian were not annoyed, but they were surprised to see that their RCM was going to be divided in half, and we communicated with the commissioners, and then we wanted it to resemble more closely to the provincial district, because the provincial one is Lothian-Frontenac. So we have affinities there, and there's no economic ties or social ties, cultural ties, or whatever with the writing of my colleague, Mr. Plamondon. So obviously, people want to remain. They have a feeling of belonging in Lothian, and they don't want to find themselves another writing that's going to be in another administrative region. So that adds some to the problems, even if provincially, maybe not so much so. But Villeroy, well, they have ties with Duplessisville to go to shows, to get their groceries. There's absolutely no direct ties with the other one. So that's why we're saying that we shouldn't head in this direction. Should we keep these three municipalities with the riding of Mégantic-L'Érable? This, as I said, it's like a banana, but it's a big banana that represents a lot of people, and people are going now. The riding Mégantic-L'Érable, so that they understand that the riding represents a huge territory. I had proposed to the Commission that we had included the word Appalache, Mégantic-L'Érable, Argenteuil. So at least people will know that we're talking about a large district. We don't have the resources to have offices in each RCM. So the only way that we can do this, given that we're dealing with so many administrative regions, it would be to include their name in the name of the riding so that they feel part and parcel of the whole process. The riding of Lotbinière, well, we know that the population has increased a great deal. The RMC, which is close to your riding, is going to be split. But in the next boundary revision, in 10 years, they will all be put into the riding that you're in, Mr. Berton. Do you feel it would be important to have a reunification? Because the RCM in Lotbinière has been around for many years, and this is a whole group of small municipalities, and we get drowned out by the larger centers. So perhaps there's some hope that in 10 years' time that we'll get them all reunited. Do you think that would be something that'd be worth considering? That's why it's so important that we not divide it into three. We hope that during the next boundary review, they will all be integrated together and integrated in a one electoral riding. That's important. And I think that's one aspect that the commissioner should take into account. And this was unanimous amongst all of the municipalities. To conclude, I'd like to thank Ms. Bibeau and Mr. Plamondon for being so open to Mr. Berthol's proposal. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for your openness. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Gord. Madame Romanado. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd also like to thank my colleagues for attending this meeting today. The fact that you have answered most of our questions, it's Mr. Berthol, it's almost as if he knows how we work here. I have just one question with respect to the names of the electoral districts. In the report, there were comments made by citizens. People are complaining that the names are becoming very, very long. So we're trying to shorten the names. Because the names were getting so long. So the question I have for you, because you've also suggested that we add other names. Mr. Plamondon, you've suggested the addition. I calculated that there were 25 names that were just as long elsewhere in Canada. I'll give you the example. Louise, Granville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes. That's long. There's also West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country. And if I get to Quebec, there's Beaupré, Île-Laurent, Charlevoix, Rimouski, Témiscouata, Les Basques, Ville-Marie, Loup-Sud-Ouest, Île-des-Sœurs, Montmagny, Île, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. So it's nice to have names like that because it designates, as the witnesses have said, it designates where the people live, and people have a better idea where they should go in order to get services. If I could add to that, the only task we worked hard in the office to come up with a name that would reflect the community as Lotbinière, Érable, Mégantic. We're talking about a river as well that goes right to the U.S. borough. Appalachia is good, but we didn't come up with any name that could really embrace everyone. We tried. I know. It's just naming my electoral district is going to take up half the time I'm allotted to make a speech. So we really did work hard, but unfortunately, the only Lotbinière, okay, they understand that federally. So we know who the MPs are and what region that they're connected with. People have to be able to identify, first of all, with their electoral riding, and the office has to be able to help all of these ridings, all these communities. Madame Bibeau, do you have anything you wish to add? That's very kind of you, but I think I've said my bit. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madame Romero. Mr. Terrien, I'd like to say that I'm very happy to see our three witnesses, and I'm happy to see that you all seem to be getting along. It's always interesting to see when we talk about borders and boundaries of electoral district, it's rare that people see things the same way, and it becomes very difficult for the commissioners. Mr. Plamondon, I'm going to summarize what you said, and I'll let you continue after that. You are in a deficit situation. They said you're in a deficit situation. Let me finish, Mr. Plamondon. They said you were in a deficit for the and that's why they wanted to add 2,000 people more. But because of your work, there's a huge growth spurt. We're expecting to see the population expand, which will more than deal with this deficit, or this so-called deficit. At least that's what I understand. And in terms, is that what you were saying? Exactly. These three municipalities, are they happy? Do they feel involved in your community? Are they saying, finally, history proves us right? Or is that not quite what they're saying to you? I can confirm this in writing. They don't have any affinities socially, economically with the other communities. And that goes back to what Mr. Berthaud and Madame Bibeau were saying. They've written me and said they prefer to remain within their normal economic zone, or their normal social zone. So it's because of the deficit that I was given all these extras. I don't really have a deficit. It no longer exists. Not based on the most recent statistics. Perhaps the commissioner wasn't aware of this information. Perhaps they weren't aware of all of this economic development. If I were to tell you, or if I were to ask you to be an economist and make a forecast, how many people over the next 2 years are going to be added to the figures that you were citing? What's your forecast? At least 5,000. So it's going to really compensate for this deficit. Yes. I have a problem with the name. I was getting to that. The name. You mentioned that there were several ridings that had long names, such as yours. First of all, they want to get Nicolet out of the name. Do the people in your region who are from Nicolet, how do they feel about this? How did they react to all of this? All of the cities in the Nicolet municipality wrote me. They were very concerned. they were the same. The Bécancourt RMC wrote me as well. They asked me to fight to keep the name of Nicolet. Even the mayor from Sorel supported this. When there was never any question of changing this or leaving out the name Nicolet, but in the report tabled in the House of Commons, all of a sudden they talk about Bécancourt, Sorel, and they would add Odenac. Well, Odenac wanted to point out that they were two nations, so they want Abenaki because the people from Abenaki are a very cultivated people. And one of their members was one of the biggest opera singers in Canada, Mr. Obinsowen, came from the Benaki Nation. He has beautiful music. There is also the only cégep in Quebec is located in Abenaki. The only Abenaki cégep is located here. So they want us to talk about their nation, the Abenaki Nation, because they're developing their language and they have a national anthem. They make various Abenaki, they perform various Abenaki songs in the schools. So the Abenaki is pronounced Alnobak. So they want to add this name. They want to add their name. They don't want to kick Nicolet out of the term, but they want to go alphabetically. I think that would be a wonderful name that would reflect the reality of my electoral district. And everyone is unanimous on this matter. That leads me to my next question. The name is long, but as you said, there are lots of other electoral districts who have even longer names, and some even have new names added to them as well. And we're trying to include Aboriginal names as well. So I do understand you. You have some unanimity for the name, and it seems to me that this is good. Mr. Terry, beep, beep, beep. So we'll go to the second round now. I'll listen to you this time. Madame Blaney.
Chair, don't have any questions. I feel like the presentation clarified the list that we need to get to, so I'm sorry, Luc. I have no hard questions for you. Later.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, on continue avec une deuxième.
Thank you. We'll begin our second round. Mr. Gord. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Mr. Berthaud. Do you think you can provide the same level of service for these 61 different centers? We'll work hard to do that, but we're not the ones who are choosing this way to work. Yes, the citizens can be reassured that we will make arrangements to provide the services. We're here to represent citizens, whether it be 50 or 61 municipalities. But it leads me to say two things, and I'd like to speak to this because I heard a lot of representations made by colleagues about a variety of things, and I know that the commissioners worked based on what the access, and I think it would be important for the next review of the electoral map that we bear two things in mind. First of all, the role of the MP in the region and the reality of rural counties that are getting bigger and bigger. And so I think it'd be important that we consider this. And I think PROC and the commissioners should bear this in mind. So the next time we do this redistribution, we have to think about the role that we want to give to the MPs who vis-a-vis the citizens. Yes, we're legislators. Yes, we have to represent a certain percentage of the population with our votes, but we have to be able to provide services to the citizens. And we have to think about this when we do the second redistribution. And secondly, we should perhaps have a second round of consultations, particularly when major changes are being made, when there are proposals that blindside us and we're not able to react in time to them. I think PROC needs to study this, the government as well. For instance, the proposal to put 3 RMC of Compton stamps in Mégantic-l'Érable. We didn't see that coming. We didn't talk. There was no talk about this beforehand. And so when the hearings took place in our regions, we didn't even raise this issue. And so the last chance people have to have their voices heard is here with our presentations. So I think that we have to bear that in mind. This is more of a recommendation I'm making to PROC rather than the commissioners. But the next time, I think it would be worthwhile for all the political parties to view that.
My next question is for Mr. Plamondon. Your riding will make history in the coming months thanks to your longevity in the House of Commons. In how many months will you be beating that record? On September 4th, it'll be 30 years. But I think the record is Mr. Upgray, who holds that record, an MP for Ontario, and I was there with him. He had 39 years and 7 months, but John Diefenbaker, 39 years and 4 months. And somebody else had 39 years and 2 months, and that was in 1867 that he was elected, at the beginning of the Confederation, basically. So if there's an election in 2025, well, we'll see what happens. But I don't know if anyone will look at the records. It'll be a difficult record to beat. Thank you, Mr. Gould. I know that Ms. Romanado stated that she didn't have any questions. Mr. Terrien. I wanted to ask a question to Ms. Bibeau, but then she responded that she didn't have anything else to say, so I didn't want to ask. But perhaps I'll ask all of you, because we talked a lot about RCMs in Quebec, that's specific in Quebec, and you each mentioned it. Perhaps each of you could say why it's important and why it's important to take RCMs into account. If you have something to say so we can understand the importance of RCMs in Quebec. It's very important because small municipalities of a couple thousand or a couple hundred people will work very closely with their RCMs. They'll have shared services. Community organizations, economic organizations will be based around the RCM. And when we talk about services, I'd be curious to see if we're looking at future changes, we could have an MP in a region and their role versus the role of an MP in a region with 6 square kilometers and some with hundreds of square kilometers. I have 5 RCMs right now, so as soon as we have multiple municipalities in RCM, we have to do the work and work with the RCM director who has 3 municipalities or 15 municipalities. We're doing the same work with the RCM team. And for the director of that RCM, well, they're working with a riding team, and they would have to do the work with 2 or 3 MPs, which increases the burden for that director. I think I explained the dynamic well in my opening remarks, but in the way that we work together, MPs and RCMs, I think the less we divide RCMs, the better it is for us and for them. The government of Quebec wanted to examine RCMs and create an economic and social structure and for health, for example, so that these RCMs would have a budget and would represent regional interests. But often when commissioners are examining boundaries and only looking at the population, well, they don't take into account that administrative structure that exists in Quebec and that works very well. For example, in the RCM of Sorel, they created air turbines, and they're the only ones in Quebec that are community-based. And that brings about $1 million net to the RCM, and that is divided for collective needs. But if I add 2 municipalities from neighboring ridings, well, those people are not approved for that share, and they would want a piece of the cake too. So we'd have to follow, as Madam Minister just said, and respect those structures. It's important for the boundaries of districts. Ms. Blaney? Thank you. So we shared some of Ms. Blaney's time with you for that answer. Mr. Berthold, Ms. Bibeau, Mr. Plamondon, thank you for your time. If you have anything else to share, please send them to the clerk, and the clerk will share it with all of the members. That said, have a good day, everyone.
Good.
Thank you for listening.
PROC committee members, I will just say Miriam will be back next week, so really kudos to Sophia and to Christine for keeping us on track this week. During the 2 constituency weeks, as we are heading into 2 constituency weeks, within one of those weeks, we will be having the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff appear. I am under the impression that there is a little bit of back and forth going on to confirm resources and the date. It is feeling like it will be the 2nd week of the constituency week. The minute I have a date and time, you will have a date and time so that there's ample time for us all to participate. The second thing, we've seen the Right Honourable David Johnston added to the list of individuals that were also in the letter, and we also have another list of members, of people we've invited. When Miriam returns, we will get that list consolidated and shared with all members in case it needs a refresher or anything like that, so that we can satisfy the intentions of this committee when it comes to foreign election interference. Because we have had such a fruitful committee so far, I guess, on foreign election interference, I have mentioned to some of you that there is a supplemental budget that would need to be passed. I have been given that budget and asked for your support in seeing that pass. I will also mention to you, based on what the intentions of this committee are and the added time we've asked for, I'm confident that these resources will not be enough, because we are adding meetings and want to make sure that the resources are here for us, including coffee and snacks. So with that, can I make sure that everyone is okay with the passage of this budget? And perfect. We will, with that, to anybody celebrating Ramadan Mubarak, Easter is coming. My birthday is coming. So I wish everybody a happy Easter as well. Keep well and safe, and I'll see you after becoming a year older after the constituent weeks. Thank you. Take care.